Well, we actually have proof that Grandpa Jerry was actually on Horns Island as well.
Nolan and Wyatt's dad had a secret friendship that we weren't even in.
Yeah, they were like best friends.
We would go over to Wyatt's house, and Nolan, we would all be in the backyard, whatever, doing something, and Nolan would be inside on the couch with Wyatt's dad, and they would just be cutting it up all night.
Yeah,
I bet you $1,000,000 if it was 5 black boys and 1 white boy on the boat. By now, there would have been an arrest, there would have been a warrant, there would have been a seizure, but because America doesn't believe that Black Lives Matter, they trying to act offended because we want to ask the question, what happened to our brother? And when we ask the question, what happened? The response is we're still gathering information. We're waiting on toxicology, waiting on the grand jury. Am I my brother's keeper? That's the question underneath every delayed subpoena, every sealed file, every complaint filed against a grieving mother's nursing license. Instead of asking whoever left her son on the island, the institutional Mississippi still muttering Kane's excuse, it's not my problem. I wanted to come to Mississippi today from Georgia to let the system and to let the establishment know, let that be the last time you try to intimidate a black mother. She's got every right to fight for her son, to stand for her son, to question her son, and you better not mess with her nurse's license. Leave that black woman alone.
Well, we actually have proof that Grandpa Jerry was actually on Horns Island as well, which makes sense why he was able to call the captain, because he physically was watching. And now who was Wyatt on the phone with? Well, we know he was on the phone with Cito Call, but let me show you Grandpa Jerry.
White-haired old man. Look, I just want you.
And she also gave us a little specialty on Wyatt. And Now I thank her for that treat, because we all been asking the same question. Where is Wyatt? Why haven't we heard from Wyatt? Where are his boats that one we know was missing from the MDMR report? We just have no information, no nothing on him. He is seemingly is in the dark, like he's just disappeared somewhere. So where is he? And why haven't we heard from him? Just asking. My opinions, just asking. And thank you, Miss Trina. Thank you, Queen. I appreciate you.
Nolan Wells. Guys, I got receipts here about the district attorney and what's going on in this case that I think is going to blow things away. You want to be the smartest kid on the block with regard to information? Trust what I'm about to say here. And with 31 years of homicide experience and running a prosecutor's office, this is big, guys. And people talk about bombshells. This is a bombshell. Well, wait a minute. I thought we don't release the results of autopsy results in Nolan Wells. Well, here's a case where they had in the very same county released autopsy results, preliminary, not even final autopsy results, and declared it a homicide. Why hasn't that happened in the Nolan Wells case? And by the way, saying that we wait until the matter's presented to the grand jury, yeah, that's true, as she indicated, for when there's a non-natural death. But what she's not telling you is why there isn't an arrest made for anybody who may have perpetrated this crime, because certainly if you look at these articles, not only do they tell you the autopsy results, not only do they ask the public for information, but they actually make arrests of individuals prior to it going before the grand jury. Also, why didn't they get a warrant for the phone? Well, if you have probable cause to believe evidence of a crime is on the phone, then you would go and you would get a warrant. Now, I am not saying I have no horse in the race here, what's going on or not, but what I am is reading inside baseball here. When you go to before the grand jury, it is a secret proceeding. And you know what? You can't get the information that's being revealed. The grand jury is not only a place where they say you can indict a ham sandwich as a prosecutor's playground. but it's also a place where you don't indict a ham sandwich, maybe. You can do whatever you want in that grand jury. So this lack of transparency, lack of press conferences, lack of giving us basic information that, as I've said in my previous videos, is not a violation of their ethics rules whatsoever. You can go consult that and consult my long form video here. Please, before you comment, if you want to become the most knowledgeable person based on somebody that's got the level of experience that I do, please go to YouTube and look at the long form 14-minute video that will explain this in detail. But I believe it's not what you see, it's what you don't see here. You don't see an arrest, you don't see a release of the autopsy results. You have her going into the grand jury where it's a secret proceeding, and I think all things are being set up, at least as of today's date, to what they call no bill this case, and no one will ever be able to see what was and wasn't presented to the grand jury because the prosecutor's not giving us any data information, certainly not making us feel comfortable that a proper investigation is being done. I think that's a huge error, huge mistake on her part.
Nolan Wells, the blackout in Gary, Indiana, public lynchings of black people. What do those three things have in common? All of these were stories that the mainstream news media did not report until we started making them trend on social media. And by we, I mean black folks. I'm talking about us. Sorry if you're not tribe. I'd be jealous if I were you, but that's not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is this. We know that the algorithms are trash. We know that the algorithm is built against us and people who talk about what we talk about. We know that these algorithms and these platforms are controlled by billionaires who want to control us. And we have more power than we think. So when we decide to get in unison, be one band, one sound, we can actually dictate the terms of the news instead of the news dictating the terms to us. Never ever forget your power and keep on saying the names. And make sure that you're subscribed to Black-owned media, independent media, Joy Reid, Roland Martin, Don Lemon, The Root, The Griot. They are telling our stories responsibly, with care, and with truth. All right? We ain't got to pay attention to the people. We got our...
This is my prediction. This is what happens in these cases. They have a case. They know it's no racial component. There's no evidence of race. But they know there can be some money made. Who do you go to when you want to make some money? You don't go to your local guy. This didn't happen across the country. This happened in Mississippi. You don't go to an attorney in Mississippi. You don't go to a representative there in your locale. You go to Benjamin Crump. Get a national figure involved. Immediately you raise $700,000 on a GoFundMe.
Warren Hudson named two different boats. Two, as the boat he started the day on. One name in a text to Nolan's mother. A completely different name in a recorded interview. Nobody has explained that. Nobody has even addressed it. But that's not all. Sea-Tow says they never towed the boat. Mississippi's own Marine Department says it was towed 2.75 miles. Two official sources. Two opposite answers. About a measurable fact. And then there's the autopsy. Done. Completed. Sealed. Not a single word released to the public. But in the same county, same Mississippi County, they released preliminary autopsy results in a different case and called it a homicide. So why is the standard different for Nolan Wells? And the part that nobody is talking about enough. The independent pathologist tried to examine Nolan's throat. It wasn't there. The throat was not present at the time of the second autopsy. That is not a rumor. That is a documented limitation in the report. His phone tracked to a friend's house after his body was found. And the family's attorneys believe messages may have been deleted from it. Christine's nursing license, threatened. A grieving mother asking questions about her dead son, and somebody came after her job, and now TikTokers, not investigators, not journalists, people on their phones at 2 a.m. going frame by frame through footage are finding things that don't match what's been said publicly. So here is where we are, and here is where we're going. Because this is not just a case with unanswered questions anymore. Notice this, the boat detail is not a side issue. Warren's explanation for why Nolan was left on the island is entirely built around what happened to that boat. The water rising, the bilge pump failing, the urgency. An hour after the group arrived on the island, problems arose with the bilge pump on one of their boats. The water in the hull was rising so quickly it almost covered the battery, and the group began to panic and shout to their friends it was time to leave. That is the account from Warren's attorneys. That is the justification. But if you cannot correctly name the boat you started the day on in a text message to the victim's mother on one occasion and in a recorded interview on another, then we have a problem. And the problem is that this inconsistency has been sitting there unaddressed while everyone is focused on other pieces of this case. And now TikTokers are finding footage, new footage, and they are looking at the grandpa detail and the timeline around it, and something in that footage is not matching what has been said publicly. We are going to stay right here in this beat for another moment, because it is important that you understand exactly what kind of inconsistency this is. This is not the kind of inconsistency where someone misremembers a color or gets a time wrong by 20 minutes. The tide line and the Palm Beach are two different boats. One is 24 feet. They are different vessels with different names, and Warren named both of them at different times as the boat he started the day on. That is a factual contradiction. It lives in the record, and the family's legal team has it. But here's the part that is going to make you lean forward. The boat switch inconsistency doesn't just raise questions about Warren's memory, it raises questions about the structure of the whole departure. Because if we don't know which boat Warren was actually on at the start of that day, and Warren himself has given two different answers, then how confident can we be in any account of who was where and when, and what was said to Nolan before that boat left the island? Think about what that means. The entire explanation for Nolan staying behind rests on one thing, that he was asked to come, that he chose to stay, and that the boat left without him because of an emergency. Warren said Nolan decided to stay on the island with a girl he was with, and that the girl was a witness to that. But the girl in question reportedly clarified to Wells's mother that her interaction with Nolan was more of a hey and bye type situation. She has not spoken publicly. And so the one person Warren pointed to as corroboration for Nolan's choice to stay has not corroborated it. That is where we are before we even get to the Cito call. Let's go there now, because this is the piece of this case that has legal weight behind it, and it is not getting the attention it deserves. Newly released audio from the day Nolan Wells vanished captures a distress call to a private marine towing company. The caller says, "Our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come?" noting there were about 7 people on board. That call was made around 4 in the afternoon. The last time Warren Hudson said he saw Wells was around 3 p.m. So the call comes in roughly 1 hour after Nolan was allegedly last seen. 1 hour. And the caller, according to what has been released, tells the dispatcher that everyone on board was unhurt and that nobody here is over the age of 21. Now here is what happened next on that call. The dispatcher then spoke with a captain for the towing company, who said a relative of the boat owner reported those on board had solved the issue and didn't need any help right now. Ultimately, Cito said its services were not needed because the boat found other help. But here is what the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources says. Cito stated they did not tow the boat after the caller informed them the issue had been resolved, but the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources states the boat was towed 2.75 miles before resuming normal operations. Cito says they didn't tow it. The State Marine Resources Department says it was towed 2.75 miles. Those are two different accounts of the same event, on the record from official sources. And now the family is legally demanding answers. Attorneys representing Wells's estate have filed 2 new subpoenas. Those subpoenas target Cito Services International and Ward Marine Services, also known as Cito South Mississippi. What are they asking for? Every dispatch recording, every document, and the STO training manual that covers what a crew is supposed to do the moment a boat is sinking call comes in, specifically between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. on July 4th. Let's sit with that window for a second. 2 to 6 p.m. That 4-hour window covers the last confirmed sighting of Nolan, the boat departure, the distress call, and the time the boat returned to Fort Bayou. GPS data shows the boat departed the island at 4:31 p.m. and returned to Fort Bayou at 5:52 p.m. and docked at 6:06 p.m. The family's attorneys want every single document and recording that touches that window. And that tells you something. It tells you they believe there is something in that window, in those records, that has not yet been made public. Whether they find it and whether it changes anything remains to be seen. But the subpoenas exist. They are filed. This is not a theory. It is a legal action taken by attorneys with standing in this case. Now, here is the part that a legal expert has put on the record, and this is where the ground shifts. A legal expert with 31 years of homicide and prosecutorial experience has raised a critical double standard that is sitting right in the open. In the same Mississippi county, Jackson County, authorities previously released preliminary autopsy results in another case and declared it a homicide. They did that. They showed that they are capable of releasing preliminary findings when they choose to. But in the Nolan Wells case, nothing. The state autopsy has been completed, but the results have not been made public. The family's independent autopsy came back first. It found the cause and manner of death undetermined pending investigation. The pathologist acknowledged multiple limitations in the report. And one of those limitations is something the family's team has already flagged. The doctor who performed the independent autopsy is working to obtain Wells's throat for examination. It was not present at the time of the second autopsy. The throat was not present. Let that land. The throat is a critical piece of a drowning examination, and it was not available to the independent pathologist. That is a documented limitation, not a rumor, not social media speculation, a documented limitation in the independent autopsy report. And it means that the independent autopsy, as thorough as it may have been, was working with incomplete physical evidence. Once the investigation is complete, the case materials, including the autopsy report, will be presented to a grand jury, which will decide whether what happened to Wells involved a crime. That is the official process as it stands. The Jackson County District Attorney's Office has previously said it will present the case to a grand jury once the local sheriff's department investigation is complete. The DA's office said convening a grand jury does not mean there is any criminality and is standard practice for most unnatural or suspicious deaths in the county. That sounds reasonable on the surface, and to be fair, the DA's office has not deviated from standard procedure as they have described it. That is the honest framing. But here is what the legal expert with 31 years of experience flagged. The grand jury process is a secret proceeding. What gets presented in that room and what doesn't, the public never sees. And if the grand jury returns what is called a no bill, meaning no charges are filed, the public would never know what was or wasn't put in front of them. The case could close with no public accounting of the evidence at all. That is not an accusation. That is how the process works. And the expert flagged it because in a case this visible, with this many unanswered questions, that possibility, a secret process that produces no charges and no transparency, is a real outcome that the family is actively trying to prevent. And that brings us to Christine, because what has been done to this woman is its own chapter in this story. Christine Wansley is Nolan's mother. She has been public, she has been vocal, she has pushed back on the official account, and in response, someone moved to threaten her nursing license. Her nursing license, a grieving mother, a woman who has not been charged with anything, who has not done anything except ask questions about her son's death, and someone went after her livelihood. That threat has been widely read as intimidation, as a message to stay quiet, and it did not work. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump has said his legal team continues to pursue its own investigation, and Christine herself has gone on camera to clarify one thing that has been misrepresented. She did not go looking for Ben Crump. Someone in their own circle made that connection. She didn't recruit the most prominent civil rights attorney in the country to manufacture outrage. The outrage existed, and someone who knew both parties made the introduction. Wells's family lawyer, civil rights attorney Ben Crump, voiced skepticism on the notion that the teenager may have drowned, saying Wells was a strong athlete who knew how to swim. The family does not accept the accidental drowning conclusion. They have said so plainly, and Crump's team is conducting its own independent investigation, citing, in their words, contradictions in the case and a lack of information from investigators. Notice this. The racial dimension of this case is impossible to separate from the investigative questions. Photos from the excursion show Wells hanging out with what seemed to be all-white friends, leading some to evoke harsh feelings about Mississippi's fraught racial history and speculate about whether race played a role in his death. Wells's death has sparked nationwide attention and speculation over whether race played a role, as Mississippi's fraught racial history looms over the case. This is the charge the family and their attorney have put on the record, not as a social media narrative. As a legal and investigative concern that what happened to Nolan Wells and what has happened to this investigation may not be entirely disconnected from the fact that he was an 18-year-old black man who went missing at a mostly white gathering in Mississippi. And here is what makes that charge something that cannot be easily dismissed. The double standard in autopsy disclosure in the same county is documented. The threat to Christine's nursing license is documented. The unresolved contradiction in Warren Hudson's account of which boat he was on is documented. And the family's attorney, a man with a national track record, has put the word contradictions on the record, in public, at the NOC National Convention. That is not nothing. But we need to be precise about where the evidence actually ends, because this is where the viewer has to hold two things at once: what we know and what we don't. What we know, Warren named two different boats as the one he started the day on. What we don't know, whether that is a lie or a memory error or a miscommunication in how the question was asked. What we know, the CTO and MDMR accounts of what happened to that boat conflict with each other. What we don't know, which account is accurate or why they differ. What we know, the official autopsy is done and sealed. What we don't know, what it says. Those are not the same questions, and right now only some of them have been answered. A legal expert with 31 years of homicide and prosecutorial experience raised something on the record that cannot be ignored. And it's not about Warren. It's not about the CTO call. It's about the process itself. The expert pointed to the same county, Jackson County, Mississippi, where authorities previously released preliminary autopsy results in a different case. They named it a homicide. Publicly, before the grand jury, before anything was final. They showed that releasing preliminary autopsy findings is something they know how to do, something they have done. So the question the expert put on the table is the right one. Why is the standard different here? Once local authorities complete their investigation, the case materials, including the state medical examiner's completed autopsy report, will be presented to a grand jury, which will decide whether Wells's death involved a crime. The findings from the state's autopsy have not been released. That is the official statement. And on the surface, that's process. That's procedure. The DA's office has maintained that convening a grand jury does not itself indicate criminality, that this is standard practice for unnatural or suspicious deaths in Jackson County. Fine. But here is what the expert flagged, and this is critical. A grand jury is a secret proceeding. What gets put in that room and what gets left out, the public never knows. If the grand jury returns what's called a no bill, no charges get filed. No one ever has to account publicly for what was or wasn't presented. The case closes, and a family gets nothing. No accountability. No transparency, no record. The DA herself said, with all of the public pressure being placed on my office, filling the void would only serve to get pressure off of me. Nolan deserves better. There is no pressure that can be placed on me and no force that is greater than the weight of the oath I took. That is a strong statement, and to be fair, it reads like someone who believes in the process. But the family's attorneys are not asking the DA to bend the process. They are asking for enough transparency to trust it, and right now, based on the public record, that trust has not been earned. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump said his legal team continues to pursue its own investigation, noting that forensic audio specialists are reviewing the complete CTO emergency call from July 4th, while ocean engineering experts are examining how Wells's body ultimately came to be recovered near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. That last part. Hold on to that, Crump said. We want to know how is that possible with the oceanic tides. You've got low tides and high tides, so it's not adding up. Attorney Eric Hertz said discussions also continue regarding a joint forensic examination of cell phones connected to the case. An inspection he expects would include the FBI if it proceeds. The FBI. If that cell phone examination proceeds with FBI involvement, this case moves to an entirely different level of scrutiny. That has not happened yet. But the fact that it is being discussed by attorneys of record, openly, on the record, tells you something about where this family's legal team believes the evidence trail goes. Now, let's pay off something planted earlier, because we talked about the sea tow call. We talked about the official account of what happened to that boat, and we established that sea tow and the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources have two conflicting accounts of the same event. One says the boat wasn't towed. The other says it was towed 2.75 miles. Sea Tow stated they did not tow the boat after the caller informed them the issue had been resolved, but the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources states the boat was towed 2.75 miles before resuming normal operations. Two official accounts, two different versions of a measurable, documentable fact. You either towed a boat 2.75 miles or you didn't. That is not a gray area. And now consider what Christine's legal team is asking for in those subpoenas. The Ward Marine subpoena goes even deeper. Christine wants all calls tied to the incident, including dispatch calls and communications between the captain, local crew, and people connected to the boat. She also wants all other communications about the incident and records showing whether any of them changed or ended Sea Tow's response. Whether any of them changed or ended Sea Tow's response. Read that slowly. That is not a boilerplate subpoena request. That is a very specific ask, and it implies a specific concern that someone may have intervened in what Sea Tow was doing that day. Whether that concern is borne out by the records, we don't know yet. The subpoenas are filed. The records have been demanded. What comes back from those requests will matter enormously. Notice this. Wansley's legal team has previously subpoenaed several major technology and social media companies, including Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, and Life360, as part of its efforts to obtain information about Wells's final hours. They voiced concerns that messages may have been deleted from Wells' phone, which they tracked to a friend's house after his body was found on Horn Island. That detail is something that has not gotten enough attention in the wider coverage. Nolan's phone, tracked to a friend's house after his body was found. And the family's concern, on the record, is that messages may have been deleted from it. That is not a social media claim. That is a stated legal concern from attorneys who have filed subpoenas with multiple platforms to try to recover whatever was there. Whether those platforms produce the records and what's in them is still an open question, but the ask is in writing, the concern is in writing, and it lives in the record. Now here is where we come back to Warren, because here is the shape of what we actually have from him on the record. Warren has said he is grieving, that he loved Nolan, that Nolan would want the truth out. He has said the boat was taking on water. He has said it was an emergency. He has said Nolan chose to stay. He pointed to a girl as a witness to that choice, and that girl has not corroborated it publicly. He named the Tide Line in text messages to Christine. He named the Palm Beach in a separate interview, and his attorneys have put out a version of events that places the group in a genuine maritime emergency that left them with no choice. To be fair, Warren's legal team has not claimed that Warren's account is perfect. What they have pointed to is that their clients, Warren, Morgan Seymour, Jax Patalo, are teenagers who are grieving a friend who cooperated with investigators and who are now being publicly accused of things they say they did not do. That context matters. Teenagers misremember. People under stress confuse details. Those are real human variables. But here is the question that won't let go. Whether Warren's account is a lie is one question. Whether it is simply incomplete is a completely different question. And right now, only the family's attorneys, not investigators, not the DA, have publicly named the boat switch inconsistency as something that needs to be answered. Does that look like panic, or does it look like a story that was told differently to different audiences? One Dr. Benjamin Hudson, the father of Warren Hudson, announced a $50,000 reward, urging people to come forward with information. The father of Warren Hudson said he's offering an additional $50,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Think about what that means. Warren's own father is offering money for information leading to an arrest. The father of the person whose account has the unresolved boat inconsistency. The father of the person Christine sent those text messages to, he is putting up $50,000. You can read that as a genuine act of a parent who wants truth. You can also read it as a complicated signal from a family that may know more than what's been said publicly. We don't know which one it is. But we name the tension because the tension is real. Reverend Al Sharpton and media mogul Tyler Perry are offering a combined $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest in the case. So between Sharpton, Perry, and Warren's own father, $150,000 is sitting on the table for anyone who knows something. And nobody has come forward, not publicly, not with anything that has changed the official record, and that silence is its own piece of information. Now, the community. This case has not stayed inside the courtroom or inside the comments section. It has moved into spaces that are harder to quantify but impossible to ignore. At the NOC National Convention, a photograph of Nolan Wells was placed in front of the podium. Not by his family, by the organization. That is a statement, that is a signal from one of the oldest civil rights institutions in the country that this case is being watched, and that the watching matters. At the time of his disappearance and death, Nolan was attending and playing football as a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He was 18 years old. He was a student. He was a football player. He had a mother who texts people at all hours trying to find out what happened to her son. And that mother, Christine Wansley, has now gone on camera multiple times, not to accuse, not to convict, but to say, "I am not going away." She clarified that she did not go looking for Ben Crump. She said someone in their own circle made that connection. That matters because it pushes back on the narrative that the family is manufacturing outrage with outside help. The outrage was already there. It came from Christine. It came from the things she was finding. And then people who knew the right people connected her to the resources to fight back. Christine Wansley has been seeking answers since her 18-year-old son disappeared from the island on July 4. Wells's body was found 2 days later. His official autopsy has been completed, but the results have not been publicly released. An independent autopsy commissioned by the family was ruled inconclusive. And now there is something new in that independent autopsy process. Forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell continues reviewing evidence gathered during the family's independent examination after previously determining that the cause and manner of death remained undetermined pending additional investigation. The review is ongoing, the pathologist has not closed his findings, he is still working, and the family's team is still trying to recover the missing throat tissue, a documented limitation that has not been resolved. Now let's be precise about what is legally concluded and what is not. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is still investigating the case. Evidence will be presented to a grand jury who will determine if criminal charges should be filed. No charges have been filed. No arrests have been made. No suspects have been named by investigators. The official cause and manner of death have not been released. As of the most recent investigative updates, investigators have not made a determination on the manner of Wells's death, but they initially reported that there was no evidence of foul play and that drowning was suspected. That is where the official record ends. No evidence of foul play. That is what was reported, but that is an initial report. And initial reports, as every person watching this channel already knows, are not the same as a completed investigation. The autopsy is done and sealed. The grand jury has not convened. Toxicology results are pending. That is the precise legal status of this case as of right now. Notice this. TMZ reported that new footage was captured on Mississippi's Horn Island at 11:17 a.m. on July 4th, before the area became crowded. Near the end of the clip, a boat bearing the name Mac Daddy appears in view. The outlet said the vessel resembles one shown in footage it previously obtained from later that afternoon. That earlier video was recorded at 2:23 p.m., according to its metadata. And here is what TikTokers found in that footage that is now circulating. The grandpa detail, the detail around the vessel, the timestamp, the inconsistency that people with phones and time and a refusal to let this go identified, not investigators, not journalists with resources, people on their phones. TMZ said an earlier video showed a young man wearing swim trunks similar in color to those Wells wore in a photograph taken that day. Authorities have not confirmed the vessel shown in the footage is connected to Wells's disappearance or death. That caveat stands. We name it because it matters. but the footage exists. It has timestamps, it has a boat name, and it is now being analyzed by people who have already demonstrated they are willing to do the work that official channels have not done publicly. And that is the story underneath the story, that the people who are closest to finding inconsistencies right now are on TikTok. Not in a precinct, not in a courtroom, on TikTok at 2 in the morning, going frame by frame through video metadata from a day that took an 18-year-old boy and has not given his family a single straight answer since. Nolan Wells was a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He was 18 years old. He left his house on the evening of July 3rd to spend the 4th of July with friends. He never came home. And Christine Wansley, his mother, has said publicly, clearly, and on the record, she does not accept that her son accidentally drowned. She has said it at the knock-up convention. She has said it on camera. She has said it through her attorneys, in every subpoena filed, every record demanded, every document requested. Her words in her own voice are the most important thing in this script. Not the CETO call, not the boat names, not Warren Hudson, Christine. A mother who says, something happened to my son, and I am not going to stop until I find out what. We'll keep following this case until there are real answers. If this case matters to you, subscribe so you don't miss the next update. The CETO records are coming. The grand jury will convene. The cell phone forensics could involve the FBI, and the footage, the new footage that TikTokers found, is still being analyzed. Now that you've heard the boat switch inconsistency and the CETO conflict laid side by side, what stands out to you most? Tell us in the comments. Because here is the question we started with, and we're going to end right here with it. If Warren Hudson cannot keep straight which boat he started the day on, in a text to Nolan's mother and in a recorded interview, what else in his account needs to be looked at? We still don't know, and that's the problem.